When playing Raft, you were introduced into a world consumed by the endless sea. Scavenging from the sea would allow you to find the plans to build a signal receiver. After going to the location of the first coordinates, you can find the radio tower. This would begin a journey across the world to discover these signals in order to find signs of human life. At the second set of coordinates discovered at the radio tower, the Vasagatan, a modified yacht, can be found wedged between some rocks just barely poking above the water. The ship can be found abandoned, yet infested by something sinister. Something was lurking in the shadows, monsters let loose by the ship's former owner. In this video, we will discover the story of the Vasagatan, its crew, its former owner, and the mutants that now call it home. This is The Mutations of Madness, the lore and story of Raft, Part 3. The Vasagatan's journey would begin long before the endless sea swallowed the world. It was once owned by General Olof of Sweden. He would be one of the figureheads behind the Floating Cities project, which aimed to build floating cities for the rich and powerful. During the project's early stages, he was questioned about his personal yacht as it had been seen being modified. This yacht would turn out to be the Vasagatan. Olof's story from before the Endless Sea plays a big part in the first video of this lore series, so be sure to give that a watch if you haven't already. That video will be linked in the description. When exploring the Vasagatan after its beaching, you can discover that the story of the ship heavily involves both Olof and a woman named Hanne. The events from Hanne's point of view kicks off the mystery of the Vasagatan. To start, she regrets leaving behind her friend Ruben. His story becomes relevant when exploring another location later in the series, but it is important to note that they know each other. Hanne would note that Olof directed the captain to head for some high-rises down south. I speculate that these could have been some of the sanctuary towers that were being built in response to the rising waters, but nothing confirms this. We can find 3 notes that Hanne wrote to Ruben, although there would be no feasible way for them to reach him. These are more likely in the event he somehow found them, allowing her to share her thoughts and feelings with him. In the first one, she would ask him why he was so stubborn. She noted that Ruben knew the city he was on would fail. This would be a reference to the floating cities, which were not ready when they set sail, but this wasn't a concern from the people responsible for the project. Even Ruben knew, but still decided to board one of the floating cities. In the second note, Hanne mentions how the Vasagatan was not prepared for its journey. She believed that Olof would have been more practical considering his military experience. Instead of acquiring enough supplies, the ship had an abundance of alcohol. Instead of making room for the supplies they had, the ship had a dance floor. Olof was treating the journey like it was a luxury cruise. Here, Hanne apologizes to Ruben and tells him she shouldn't have left his side. In the third note by Hanne, she tells of an alarming discovery. She found an unnervingly large rat on the ship. She tried telling the crew about a possible infestation in the supply room, but they laughed at her. She ends this note by telling Ruben she misses him. We can see over the course of her 3 notes that her trust in the Vasagatan was fading, which was being replaced by regret for not sticking with Ruben. In such dark times, people make desperate decisions, and sometimes the consequences of these types of decisions don't see the light of day until it is too late. Just like Hanne, Olof would leave behind 3 travel logs detailing his time on the Vasagatan following the rising waters. The first travelogue gives us a taste of the kind of person he really is. He not only threatens to reprimand the captain for complaining about his route, but also threatens to cut off the crew's rations for their actions. The captain's concerns are valid as it is their job to make sure the ship's path is safe. The crew were accused of being undisciplined for talking to the yacht's guests. This note establishes an interesting theme for the story of the yacht that makes a lot of sense when you know who Olof really is. The Vasagatan has a tiered society, including what I assume to be some wealthy or powerful guests that had a connection to Olof, and former members of the military that worked under him before the rising waters. The guests were probably the reason why there was so much alcohol and a dance floor on the ship. They also likely partook in the luxury rooms as well as other amenities on the ship. The crew were the ones maintaining the ship's course, doing repairs, cooking, and cleaning. Olaf's accusations of their undisciplined nature is followed by him noting rank and prestige, which he believed they forgot when they left land. This tells us that some, if not most of the crew was former military. Olaf's lack of concern for his crew shows just how awful of a person he was. He expected discipline and respect as if his rank meant something, despite the fact that the land he used to represent was far below the endless sea. This would only lead to chaos. In his second travelogue, Olaf continues to show his true colors. He even makes a disturbing suggestion for the sake of survival. At this point, the infestation has made itself known to the ship's crew, but Olaf didn't believe them. He called them incompetent because he couldn't believe that rats had eaten half of their supplies in the matter of weeks. He found it impossible to believe, but he wasn't aware of the severity or the size of the infestation. He promised to provide additional rations if they could present one of these rats, dubbed lurkers, to him. To end his travelogue, he casually suggests that cannibalism would be the solution to their food problem. He doesn't say it directly, but he threatens to terminate a staff member, which would handle the food shortage. This could mean that they plan to kill one of the crew members to reduce supply use, but alternatively, he could also be thinking of a much worse outcome for said crew member. Olaf's third travelogue gives us a glimpse into his new plan now that the lurkers have shown their potential. They were smarter and more rabid than regular rats, a possible mutation originating from an unknown source. He began training them and noted they would respond. Forcing them to share each other's blood would cause the mutation to worsen. He begins to form the idea of cross-species contamination, which would be followed by a notable transmission they had received. Caravan Town, a settlement not far from the Vasagatan, had an active animal population. It was now in danger. It could be the breeding ground for more mutations. Olaf's ultimate plan was to ditch his human crew and use the lurker mutation to create loyal soldiers out of animals he could get his hands on. For the next 3 lore entries from the Vasagatan, I will actually play the audio recordings because they are conversations between multiple characters that were recorded onto cassette tapes. I think these are worth sharing in their entirety because they give us a rare look at these characters interacting with each other. This unfortunately only happens in 2 destinations across the game. Who made these recordings is a mystery, but they give us a look into the final days on the Vasagatan before its crash landing.
But what does that mean? You can't just fire them, we're out at sea.
Hanne, you were brought to keep the engines running. That is what you...
That's one of those damn rats. What are you doing to it?
Get out! Do your job.
This first audio tape tells us what Hanne's role was on the Vasagatan, which was to keep the engines running. This actually makes sense if we jump to Tangaroa and learn that Reuben also did the same thing for the floating city. This conversation happens after Olaf's decision to start terminating crewmates, which Hanne didn't understand since they were at sea. I still personally believe that this was a prelude to cannibalizing the crew one member at a time to solve the food shortage. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the screams of a lurker. Hanne asked him what he was doing with it, but he would tell her to leave and do her job. This would be the start of his training process to make the lurkers more loyal to him.
Wilkstrom, it's urgent! There's mist now! We don't know how far the water's risen! The maps are useless! We need to...
The crew are planning a mutiny, Captain. It is time to act.
Mutiny? They're just trying to stay alive! Are you mad?
I gave you a chance to live. Now we have to protect ourselves from the masses. We will use the lurkers to our advantage.
The second audio tape actually demonstrates that Olaf is straight up mad. His perception of an undisciplined crew was really an attempt to solve their problems and survive. Everything from the disappearance of their supplies, to their intermingling with the guests, to their complaints over the infestation, was viewed as a mutiny against him. While the captain was trying to keep the ship from crashing, Olaf was more concerned about keeping power and maintaining order. The captain asking Olaf if he had gone mad rings truer than ever at this point.
Get to the lifeboats! Hurry! Hurry!
Olof, you coward!
Watch out!
The third audio tape and final note from the Vasagatan would take place in the ship's final moments before it could no longer be considered seaworthy. In this chaotic recording, the captain is trying to direct the crew to the lifeboats as the ship grinds against the rock. Hanne is shouting towards Olof as he makes his escape in his own lifeboat. Before the end, a lurker would attack them. This would mark the end of the story of the Vasagatan. To summarize the story of the Vasagatan, Olof Wilkström would invite special guests to live a life of luxury on his modified yacht before the rising waters got out of control. He would also give a crew of former military members a chance to survive on board the ship, but they would work to keep the ship running and be separated from the rest of the guests. Olof prepared the yacht more for a cruise than for survival, leading to supply issues. He also had a strange route that would take them south. His crew, including the captain, would complain about these issues, but he would remind them that they are only alive because of him. He would also threaten them with reduced rations. A rat infestation would grow and feast on the little supplies the ship had, leading to food shortages. Hesitant at first, Olof didn't believe the missing supplies were being eaten by rats. Instead, he proposed terminating crew members, which I still believe to be a prelude to cannibalism. Once Olof discovered the infestation, he only saw it as an opportunity to take advantage of their mutation. Growing mad from power, he shaped them into his perfect army of loyal soldiers. The lurkers would be his solution to what he perceived as a mutiny, but in reality was the crew's attempt to survive. With the discovery of Caravan Town, Olof made his escape with the lurkers, leaving everyone else to deal with the loss of the Vasagatan. Before I end this video, I want to include an analysis of the second audio tape, which may give us a deeper glimpse into what Olof actually meant. This could have another meaning, so you can consider this to be a bit more on the speculation side. In his conversation with the captain about a growing mutiny, Olof uses choice words. It's lines like, "We have to protect ourselves from the masses," and "We will use the lurkers to our advantage," that makes me believe he is declaring war against anyone that isn't on his level. By that I mean level of power, wealth, class, or influence. He uses ourself and we, meaning he is talking about more than one person. His use of the word masses also gives another clue as to what he means here. The we includes himself and anyone else with power and wealth. These people would come to be known as the investors later in the story of Raft. They will get their own video later on, but I do talk about them briefly in the first part of this lore series. It will be linked in the description if you want to watch it later. The masses would refer to the captain and crew of the Vasagatan, the working class of the old world, and pretty much every rafter out there that is just trying to survive. What I believe the lurkers presented to Olof was the ability to oppress and control the survivors of the Endless Sea, giving him absolute power. Knowing that Olof has a connection to the rising waters, we can see another possible reason for why he and the investors did what they did. They wanted to rid the world of most of the working class, consolidate power and wealth, and rule over the few who remained. Looking ahead to his arrival at Caravan Town, Olof was alone with the lurkers on his boat, meaning he left behind the wealthy guests on the Vasagatan. These are probably people he was acquainted with, but he didn't care for. They were likely rich and powerful, but not investors level rich and powerful. This is just my 2 cents on this matter, which I think validates the captain's concerns over Olof's sanity. Olof Wilkström was verifiably mad with power. It's crazy how much these 2 lines from one lore entry can help unravel Olof's intentions, but you should take this with a grain of salt. It's possible I am wrong. The end of this video marks the end of the story of the Vasagatan and its crew, but Olof and Hanne's stories do continue later in the story of Raft. At some point though, there is a broadcast from a place called Balboa, which includes its coordinates. This would be the next destination to explore in the Endless Sea. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or a comment for the algorithm so I can keep making them. Also, I've been covering the lore for another survival game called The Long Dark. I'll link some of those videos on the end screen if you are interested. Remember what we are fighting for, Forward Scout. I'll see you at Balboa Island.